Are you ready to hear a story that will give you goosebumps? If you are, hit that like button to boost your courage, share to warn your friends, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any chilling tales from us. Now then, let the story begin.
I'll start with the one thing you came here to hear. Yes, I rob graves. Not the fresh ones, not the popular ones, and not the ones with the soft edges where dirt hasn't settled and the flowers are still brave enough to stand. I pick the kinds of graves that look like a cough of stone in a field of neglected grass. The ones that have lost their names to lichen and winter. And before you climb into the moral pulpit, understand this much. I do it because bills don't pay themselves, and chemo doesn't wait for my pride to grow back. Beth is the kind of woman who learned to smile with a thermometer in her mouth. She jokes with nurses that the gown's her color, that the ivy pole is just an inconvenient dance partner. I cannot watch that and then clock in at a car wash that won't cover the week's groceries. So I built myself a code, a way to be dirty without being vile, as if rules make a thief into anything but a thief. My rules are simple because simple sticks. I leave the young alone. I leave the recently mourned alone. I leave mausoleums alone. Trade secret on the last one. And no, you won't pry it out of me. It's not a superstition if the superstition has the teeth. I research. I target the ones who, in life, treated ethics like a nap they meant to wake from but never did. Old merchants with salt in their ledger lines. Bankers who salted away more than cash. Sheriffs with heavy rings and light consciences. If I'm going to steal, I'll steal where justice forgot to. It felt almost righteous when I read the name. Bertholdt, 19th century, big on whale oil and narwhal horn. Pick your cruelty. A ledger-slick tradesman who died fat and friendless. Some niece inherited the mess, took one look, and donated the lot to the church like a child hiding broken glass in a hymn book. The church, I learned, accepted most of it, but balked at something. Not a painting, not a reliquary, not anything that could sit in a parlor and pretend to be pious. An artifact, the journal said without saying what. They buried it with him. I felt it then, that tick in the blood you get when a lock wants you. Whoever wrote the note was careful, but you can't write around greed. You always leave a thumbprint. Artifact. Not kept, buried. That was enough. In my line of work, you can smell a payday the way wolves smell winter. I closed the journal's cracked leather, thanked the librarian with a nod that pretended I was researching genealogy, and stepped into the afternoon heat with a feeling like a door had just opened somewhere I couldn't see. Hillview sat 3 hours out. Corn, billboards, and the kind of towns where the only thing open after 10 is the pharmacy and the gossip. I grabbed motel room that cost less than it smelled. Told Beth the conference was going well. We don't say heist, we say conference, we say trip. And laid on the polyester bedspread until the alarm watched me fall asleep. 2 a.m. is when the world forgets what it owes you. I put my hair up, pulled on the beanie, counted gear by touch. Lamp, pry bar, bolt cutters, 2 shovels, knife, water, gum for the nerves, and a rosary I would never admit to carrying. People think a thief is fearless. Truth is, we're just good at filing fear into drawers. You can open the right one later if you make it that far. The county roads were a ribbon of dull eon under the moon. I passed a cop asleep in his cruiser. the kind of municipal mercy God still allows. Coyotes stitched the distance together with their yips. The radio whispered old country songs, and I let them play, because company is sometimes the difference between a clean decision and a stupid one. I kept thinking about Beth's shoulders, how thin they'd gotten, and how she kept humming while she folded laundry, like chores were a spell that could keep the house intact. Hillview rose like a humped shoulder of the earth, a single hill in fields that forgot what a hill was. The cemetery curled around it in rings, and at the top a birch leaned, carved with enough initials to prove love can be a vandal. The gates were locked, they always are. The side road was not, and the rut said trucks used it. I slowed, light still on, because ditches don't care if you're discreet, and made the last turn into fog that had not been there 10 minutes ago. A reasonable man would have gone home. I am not a reasonable man at 2:15 in the morning with a wife who jokes with thermometers. I parked short of the bend, killed the lights, and listened. There's a quiet that belongs to churches and to slaughterhouses just before the chain starts moving. Hillview had that quiet. It didn't scare me, it organized me. I shouldered the pack, left the spare shovel in case the ground lied about how hard it was, and started up the slope on a footpath that remembered boots better than Sunday shoes. I'm telling you all this because people like stories to make sense. They like to find the moment the dam broke and say, there, that's where you could have stopped it. The thing is, you never know which small step is the last sensible one. Maybe it was when I convinced myself rules were morality. Maybe it was when I touched a church's secret with dirty hands. Maybe it was when I bought the rosary just in case. But I can give you this much. Before I saw what I saw, before the screaming started and the dirt followed me home, I believed in my code the way a drunk believes in the curb to catch him. I believed there was a way to sin politely. I believed I could be a thief and a husband and a man who sleeps. Then I reached Hillview, and the fog unzipped to let me in like I had an appointment. The road narrowed, shoulders disappearing into pale weeds that clicked against my boots. I'd left the truck tucked between two walnut trees where the branches hunched low enough to look conspiratorial. The air here had a texture, a thickness that made me think of rooms where people have been whispering for too long. The fog was not a blanket. It was a tide, creeping uphill as if it knew what I'd come for. I'd scouted this road 6 hours ago. It was clear then, dry and honest in the sunlight. But as I rounded the next curve, my lamp caught something solid enough to halt me mid-step. A tree, wide as a chest freezer, lay across the road. Fresh, the wood bled pale sap, and its severed roots curled in the air like stiffened veins. That was wrong for two reasons. One, there had been no wind tonight. Two, Hillview had no oaks. None. This land grew fruit and nuts, shallow-rooted things that died politely when their time came. An oak this thick would have been a local legend, something carved with prom dates and war initials. I'd have noticed it. The part of me that still pretends at caution said, this is a warning. The part that pays rent said, step over it. I tested the bark with my boot, slick. The smell was sharp and green, as if the tree had been alive minutes ago. There was no chainsaw mark, no splintered lean. It had fallen without help, or with help that knew how to hide. I slung my leg over and kept going, knife hilt warm under my palm. The fog wrapped closer. Distance lost its manners. What was 5 feet away looked painted on glass. Shapes came and went at the corner of my vision, quick and tall, too fast for human, too graceful for deer. Every so often, a sound rode the fog's breath. The scrape of grit under a shoe, a hitch of breath that was not mine. I'd pause, turn my head slow, and find only mist. Coyotes appeared in 2s and 3s along the slope. Their silhouettes cut sharp against the milky air. They didn't run. One stood dead center of the path. A scrap of skull dangling from its teeth. A bird's from the look of it. The creature met my eyes with a calm I couldn't decide was respect or warning. Its ears twitched forward once, then it walked sideways into the dark, the skull swinging like a pendulum. A sound knifed the quiet. It was not a coyote yip, not even close. It was a human scream, thin but deep, as if it had been pulled from the bottom of something. It came from uphill, bounced once between the stones, and lodged somewhere in my ribs. My first instinct was to dim the lamp, drop into a crouch, and make myself into a knot the fog could forget. Silence after screams is worse than the scream itself. It's a vacuum that begs to be filled. 30 seconds passed. Maybe more. Then it came again, closer, cutting the fog like it had teeth. Coyotes answered with their jagged choir, the notes running out of sync until the whole hill sounded like an argument in a language I wasn't meant to learn. Somewhere above, the moon smothered itself behind a slow-moving lid of cloud. I stayed frozen until the air stopped shaking in my chest. It didn't come a third time. The hill quieted, except for my pulse. I checked my watch, 3:08 a.m. An hour until the east began to gray. That meant an hour to dig, pry, and vanish before Hillview's old-timers came for their dawn walks. The ones who smell trouble faster than dogs. The path changed under my boots, gravel instead of dirt, with wide, uneven steps climbing through knee-high grass. This was the walkway I'd found on my scouting trip. The one that ringed the hill like a belt. Follow it far enough, and you landed on the west side, where Bertholdt's grave sat apart from the others, as if even death preferred his company at a distance. The fog thickened higher up. Lamplight pushed back barely an arm's length. My walking stick tapped ahead in cautious rhythm. Stone, stone, gap, stone. Once, the stick sank into nothing and came back wet, as if something down there had licked it. I told myself it was rainwater in a hole and kept walking. Now and then I felt the slope vibrate under my soles. Not enough to knock me, but enough to tell me something heavy had moved in the dark. Once it happened twice in a row, spaced like footsteps from something with a long stride. I tightened my grip on the stick and sped up, the sound of my own breathing suddenly too loud. It's a strange thing. On paper, I was alone. In practice, I had the bone-deep certainty that every step I took was being counted, that somewhere, just out of the lamp's reach, a matching step fell in sync, like the hill itself was pacing me. By the time I reached the west ring, the fog had loosened just enough to show the grave markers in ghostly rows. Bertholdt's spot was still 50 yards off. The air here had a taste, metallic, as if the soil had bled once and never quite stopped. I passed a cluster of broken markers like crooked teeth, each crowned with a thick braid of black moss. One had fresh flowers at its base. I averted my eyes. My code still meant something. When the grave came into sight, I knew it was him. The stone sat alone, grass-trimmed shores shuddered as if even weeds kept their distance. A bench faced it slick with dew. The ground nearby was disturbed, not by man, but by animal. A scatter of bird skulls strung together on sinew lay in a heap, the eyes of each one drilled neat and round. The coyotes, maybe, or something that knew how to make ornaments. I nudged the skulls aside with my boot, their hollow gazes rolling in the damp grass. The first shovel bite was met with the wet sigh of soil giving way. Behind me, from somewhere in the fog, came the softest sound, like a tongue clicking against teeth. I didn't look. Not yet. The ground gave way in layers. Wet grass, dark loam, then the resistant bite of clay. Each shovel strike came back heavier than it should have, like the hill didn't want to give him up. My breath fogged under the beanie, my shoulders burning from the angle. By the time steel rang against something solid, the east had begun to pale. Not enough to see by, but enough to remind me the clock was bleeding. Wood, mahogany, I guessed from the deep reddish shadow in the lamplight. It was in better shape than any coffin that old had a right to be. The name carved on its face was still legible. Bertholdt. Beneath the name, in thinner, older letters, ran a line of Latin. Mortui vivos docent. The dead teach the living. That should have been my warning. Instead, I reached for the bolt cutters. The locks came off one by one with dull snaps, each sound echoing too far in the fog. I told myself it was just the cold that made my fingers clumsy. My chest was tight with that particular blend of greed and dread you get when the payday is close enough to taste. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. I wedged the pry bar under the seam and leaned until the wood groaned and split. A curl of air slid out, damp and sweet in the wrong way. The smell of soil and something that has been waiting. When I threw the lid open, my grin froze. Boots, jeans, a jacket stained through in a deep, rusted red. My eyes climbed, and every rung of the ladder hurt worse. The jawline I knew from my mirror. The wedding band that hadn't left my finger in a decade. The hands crossed over the chest, one holding my shovel, the other my lamp, like burial gifts to a pharaoh of cheap crimes. It wasn't Bertholdt. It was me. Not dead, not exactly alive. The skin had a tone. The hair was matted but full. The lips parted just enough to show teeth. My own teeth. The eyes were closed at first, a small mercy. Then they opened slowly, like they just remembered they could. And they looked right at me. I stumbled back, boots sliding on the damp grass at the lip of the grave. My brain threw up easy lies. A trick of the light, exhaustion, a hallucination from bad motel air. But my gut knew better. That was my face in the ground, and it was staring like it had been waiting for me to arrive. The thing in the coffin sat up in one smooth, unnatural motion. Blood, fresh, bright, poured from its mouth in a steady curtain, soaking its front until it looked dipped in red. It didn't cough, didn't spit. It just let it happen, eyes never leaving mine. The sound was a wet hiss, as though the blood itself was speaking in some sure tongue my ears refused to translate. Then it screamed. Not a human scream, not an animal's either. It was thick, bubbling and wrong, as if the sound were being dragged through a throat full of liquid. It shook the air so hard I felt my ribs buzz. Coyotes took up the call in jagged yelps. And somewhere, far below, I swore the earth gave a low, answering moan. I tried to run, but my body locked. My knees wouldn't bend. My heels dug in uselessly against the dirt. The scream swelled until it felt like the fog was vibrating around us, until my vision warped at the edges I don't know if it was that force or some hidden instinct that finally broke the paralysis, but the next thing I knew, I was clawing my way up the wall of the grave, the thing's gaze still nailing me in place. I lost my grip on the shovel, the lamp, everything but the will to get out. My hands hit cold grass. Then I was up and running, half sliding down the slope, the fog tearing at my legs. The scream followed, louder now, closer. Not behind me anymore, but all around, as if the air itself was chasing me. I wove between gravestones, boots getting on wet stone. Behind me came the slap of feet against soil, quick and sure, gaining. Each time I risked a glance over my shoulder, the fog hid it, but the footsteps only came faster. There are moments when fear makes you efficient. I was clearing rows of stones in 2 strides, ducking low where the mist thickened, cutting angles without thought. I don't remember deciding to aim for the orchard, but suddenly the air thinned, and I was between the trunks, weaving until my lungs clawed for air. Only then did the footsteps fade. The scream died with them, leaving a silence so complete it roared. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I made it to the truck, slammed the door, and only then realized my teeth were chattering so hard I could hear the click over my pulse. I checked the mirrors again and again on the drive back, expecting to see my own blood-slicked face sprinting after me in the high beams. Nothing. Just empty road. By the time I hit the edge of the next town, I'd convinced myself it could have been anything. Sleep deprivation, suggestion, some guilt-born hallucination. I even started to feel better, but the image stayed. Me in the ground, looking up like I'd been the one waiting all along, and somewhere in the back of my skull, a smaller, truer voice was whispering, "If you left it in the coffin, then what's following you home?" By the time the sun smeared its pale light over the horizon, I'd decided on my alibi. Bad dreams, overwork, motel coffee too thin to count as caffeine. The mind is eager to make treaties with fear if it means you can still walk into your own house without checking every mirror. I made it home around 7. The driveway looked the same, cracked concrete. The azalea bush Beth insisted on nursing back to life each spring. The chipped porch step that never got fixed. I lingered in the truck, watching the stillness as if it might twitch. The morning air was cool, and for a moment, I believed I'd outrun whatever Hillview had tried to hand me. Inside, the house had that stale smell of rooms left closed too long. I kicked off my boots, dumped my jacket on the couch, and went straight for the shower. Hot water worked its way into the knots in my shoulders. By the time steam curled up the mirror, my breathing had evened out. No screaming in the distance, no fog clawing at the windows, just my house, my walls, my lock on the door. I toweled off, padded barefoot into the living room, and froze. The front door was open. Just a sliver, no more than a hand's width, but enough to let in a ribbon of cool air that brushed my ankles. I knew I'd locked it. I always do, even when Beth teases me about it. Beth? My voice sounded too small in the room. Nothing. I stepped toward the door, but stopped halfway when something in the kitchen shuffled. A faint clink, glass on tile. Beth, if you're back early. I trailed off. She wouldn't be back early. She was supposed to stay with her sister until Thursday. And Beth doesn't shuffle. She moves with purpose, even if it's just to make tea. The air behind me changed. A tiny disturbance, like someone had just stepped into the room. I turned. The front door slammed shut hard enough to rattle the frames on the walls. Sunlight flashed once through the living room window, and in that heartbeat of glare, I saw the porch. Empty. Another sound from the kitchen. A deliberate one this time. The slow, scraping drag of something across the counter. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. I moved toward the front door again, keeping my eyes on the kitchen's shadowed entryway. That's when I hit it. A mound of loose dirt, ankle deep, right outside the threshold. My foot slid, and I went down hard onto the porch, pain flaring in my leg. I yanked it toward me and hissed, sprained ankle, maybe worse. But the pain dissolved when I looked up. At the far end of the yard stood a figure. Me, clean clothes, dry boots, jacket zipped. My hair combed back the way Beth liked it when we still went out on Fridays. But the eyes, they were wrong. Not angry, not even cold, just empty. As if no one was home behind them. It smiled. I must have made a sound because the thing tilted its head slightly. Curious. Like a dog trying to place a noise. The smile widened in a slow pull that showed too many teeth, my teeth, and I scrambled backward into the house without realizing I'd chosen the more dangerous direction. I don't remember crossing the living room, only the sensation of my hands fumbling for keys, phone, anything I could take. My mind had gone mechanical. No words, just movement. I was in the truck with the engine growling before I'd registered the turn of the ignition. The figure didn't follow. It just stood there, smiling, until I turned the corner and lost sight of it. Halfway down the highway, I called Beth. My voice was ragged, unconvincing. I told her to stay at her sister's for a while, that something had happened to the house. Plumbing, maybe gas. She didn't believe me, but she promised she wouldn't come home. I didn't say anything about the man in the yard who wore my face like a perfect empty mask. That night, I parked in a strip mall, lot one town over, under a light that buzzed but never went out. I kept the driver's seat tilted back just enough to see the mirrors without being obvious. My ankle throbbed. My hands shook every time I thought about sleeping. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, faint but familiar. The scream. It was farther away than in Hillview, but not by much. A bubbling roar that carried across the asphalt and turned the buzzing light overhead into something sharp. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles ached, eyes darting between mirrors. Nothing there, but I knew better. It was closer than last night, and tomorrow night it would be closer still. I didn't go home again. Not to shower, not to change clothes, not even to grab the photo of Beth on the mantle that I used to carry in my wallet. That house was no longer mine. For the next 3 nights, I slept in the truck, moving it every few hours, like some wild thing trying to shed a hunter. Supermarket lots, rest stops, the back corner of an all-night car wash, anywhere with light and at least one other soul awake. Sleep came in thin, fragile strips, and when it broke, it always broke the same way. That scream, bubbling and wet, pressing against my eardrums like it was being whispered from inches away. The worst part wasn't the sound. It was the way it moved. The first night, it was faint enough that I told myself it might be a dream. The second night, it was clear and directionless, spilling into the air like water into a basin. The third night, it came from behind the truck, just outside the halo of the parking lot lights. I didn't check. By the fourth day, I was running out of cash and excuses to be gone. Beth's texts were starting to stack up. Are you okay? When will you be home? And each one twisted the knot in my stomach tighter. I told her not to come back, not to even set foot on our street. I didn't say why. How do you tell your wife you brought something back from a grave and it's wearing your face like a stolen suit? I needed answers, not police. They'd asked the wrong questions. The kind that end with psych evaluations and locked doors, not friends. I'd burned most of those bridges years ago. That left strangers. The library in the next town had public terminals and a corner so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat. I sat there for hours, searching anything I could think to string together. Doppelgänger folklore, double self-death omen, graveyard revenant mimic, creature that wears your face. Results bled together. Cheap horror forums, rehashed urban legends, blog posts with more atmosphere than evidence. But a pattern emerged. In every culture, there's a story about a thing that takes your shape. In some, it's a herald of death. In others, it's the thing that kills you and lives your life afterward. And no one can tell the difference. One word kept resurfacing in the older sources: countersoul. A countersoul isn't born. It's made, called into being when something of yours crosses into a space it shouldn't. A place of the unremembered dead. The descriptions varied, but all agreed on this. The countersoul wants to replace you. Not kill you, replace you. It will stalk, Harry. Frighten and exhaust until you slip. Until you're too tired to run. Too worn to fight. And when you're done, it steps into your life like it was always meant to be there. One entry, written in shaky ink on a scanned page from 1911, stopped me cold. It can only be called when the grave is opened by the hand of its living likeness. I'd given it my hands. I'd pried open the coffin. I almost slammed the book shut, but another line pinned my eyes to the page. The dead teach the living. The Latin on Bertholdt's coffin. I left the library in a fog of my own making, pages still turning in my mind. The scream had grown louder each night. If the stories were true, that meant it was closing the gap. Soon it wouldn't scream from the dark. Soon it would be in the light, smiling like it had on my lawn. That evening, while nursing bad coffee at a 24-hour diner, a man slid onto the stool beside me. Grey beard, coat too heavy for the weather, eyes the pale green of old glass. He'd been sitting 2 booths over earlier, pretending to read a menu that never moved. "You've seen it," he said without preamble. His voice was more gravel than air. I didn't answer, but that was enough for him. "Don't matter how you found it, or it found you. Same end either way." I turned to face him. "You know what it is?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Countersoul, old as the rot it comes from. You dug where you shouldn't, didn't you? Took the lid off?" I swallowed. "It looked like me. That's because it's yours. It's got your hands, your walk, your breath. Every scream you hear, it's closer. Every night you last, it learns you better. Then how do I stop it?" He shook his head slow. "Stopping's for fairy tales. You can trade with it though, or outrun it for a while, if you don't mind running until your knees give." "What do you mean trade?" "Give it someone else. Someone it wants more. Not many got the stomach for that. You probably don't neither." He slid off the stool before I could answer, tossing a crumpled bill on the counter for his untouched coffee. At the door, he glanced back once. "If you go back to where you called it, take something it left behind. That's the only way to talk." Then he was gone into the rain that had started without me noticing. I sat there until my coffee was cold, the words sinking in like stones in a pond. If I wanted to face it, if I wanted even a chance at ending this, I'd have to go back to Hillview, back to the coffin, back to the thing wearing my face, and pray it would talk before it screamed. I put off going back for 2 more nights. 2 more nights of parking in lit lots, eating from gas stations, dozing with one eye open while the scream got closer. The 3rd night, I woke to find my truck's driver's side mirror tilted downward, showing only my own door handle. I hadn't touched it. That decided it. If the thing could come this close without me hearing it, then soon enough it wouldn't bother with stealth. I couldn't wait for it to make the last step. So I drove toward Hillview, the clock on the dash crawling toward midnight. The road was empty, the moon drowning in ragged clouds. The radio stayed off. The only company I wanted was the hum of the engine and the occasional slap of wind against the side mirror. When the hill rose in the distance, it looked taller than I remembered, its shoulder lost in a haze that wasn't quite fog, wasn't quite smoke. The closer I got, the more the air thickened, until each breath felt like it had to be chewed. The padlocked gates were still there, the metal slick with recent rain. I left the truck tucked behind the same walnut trees, pulled on gloves, and started up the side road with my lamp low. The fallen oak was gone. In its place, the dirt showed a wide groove, as if something massive had been dragged off into the orchard. I stepped over it, trying not to imagine what shape that drag mark belonged to. The coyotes didn't show this time. The hill was empty, silent. My boots crunched on gravel, the sound swallowed almost instantly by the thick air. When I reached the base of the steps, I saw something I'd missed before. A tree partway up the slope, gnarled and bent, its bark carved over and over with initials inside hearts. Some were shallow and faded. Others were deep enough to split the bark. The edges still fresh and pale. In the center of the trunk, half buried under overlapping carvings, was a symbol. 2 intersecting circles with a single vertical line cutting through both. The same mark had been scratched, hastily, crudely, into the coffin lid before I broke the locks. The tree of lovers' names, the local historian had called it in the journal. But standing there, I realized it wasn't about love. It was a ledger, a record of bargains. Somewhere up the slope, a single stone clicked against another. I froze, lamp dimmed. The path twisted twice, the fog curling tighter around my knees. When Bertholdt's grave came into view, the bench beside it was gone. In its place sat a mound of dirt, shaped almost like a seat. And in the center of that mound, half sunk and glistening wet, lay my shovel, the same one I dropped when I ran. I didn't step closer. Instead, I crouched and reached out with the stick I'd brought, hooking the handle and dragging it toward me. The metal was cold, wetter than dew should make it. The ground in front of the grave shivered. Not a quake, a ripple, like something was stretching just beneath the surface. The Latin on the coffin lid flashed in my head again. The dead teach the living. My breathing turned shallow. "You wanted me back," I said into the fog, voice cracking. "I'm here." The ripple became a bulge. Then the earth split. It rose slow. First the crown of my head, then my eyes, then the rest, until the thing stood fully in the open grave. Me, exactly as I'd left it. blood still slicking its jacket, lips pulled into that too wide smile. In one hand, it held my lantern. The other was empty, palm up, like an invitation. "You can talk," I said. I don't know why I said it. Maybe because the scream was worse than any words could be. It didn't answer, but it nodded once, then tilted its head toward the tree of names. The meaning was clear. We weren't going to speak here. I hesitated. My gut screamed to run. But if I left again, I'd never stop running. So I followed. The tree loomed out of the fog, carvings catching the lantern's light. The thing knelt before it, pressing its palm against the mark of the intersecting circles. The bark split under its hand, revealing a hollow just wide enough for something to be stored inside. It reached in and pulled out an object wrapped in oilcloth. When it peeled the cloth away, I saw it. The artifact the church hadn't wanted. A mirror, small enough to hold in one hand, the glass dark as still water. The frame was silver, tarnished black, engraved with the same twin circles. The creature held it toward me. I didn't take it. My reflection in the glass wasn't my face. It was its face, blood-slick grin and empty eyes. The voice, when it finally came, was both of ours speaking at once. Trade. The word hung in the fog like smoke that didn't drift. Trade. The mirror's dark surface trembled in the creature's hand, ripples spreading across the glass as if it were water about to boil. My reflection swam inside, twisting until it wore my real face, tired, hollow-eyed, still smeared with grave dirt. "What do you want?" My voice cracked on the last word. It tilted its head, those empty eyes narrowing just enough to make the shape of a smile even without its mouth moving. The answer was obvious. Me. "You can't have that." It didn't argue. Instead, it turned the mirror until the glass faced the hill below. Shapes bloomed in the black surface. Shifting visions that hit me like a gut punch. Beth, in our kitchen, laughing at something just out of view. The counters looked clean, the light warm, the kind of evening we hadn't had in years. Then the image widened, and I saw me walk into the frame. Not the one holding the mirror, but me, clean, uninjured, smiling like I'd never been afraid of anything. He kissed her. She kissed back. The glass rippled again, and the scene changed. Now I was there too. The real me, outside the window, watching it all from the dark, unable to knock, unable to speak. The thing lowered the mirror. The message didn't need words. This could be yours. This life, this version of you. But you have to give me something in return. "What?" I whispered. It turned, pressing the mirror into my hands. The silver frame burned cold against my skin. Inside the glass, my own reflection flickered and changed. Not into Beth, not into my life, but into a stranger. A man I didn't know. Middle-aged, lean, wearing a work uniform with a name patch I couldn't read. He sat in a diner booth, sipping coffee, looking out a Rain Street window. The fog around us seemed to lean closer, listening. The creature's voice, our voice, came again. Him. The rules clicked together in my head. The archivist's words in the diner came back. Give it someone else. Someone it wants more. The mirror wasn't showing me a random face. It was showing me a target. If I delivered him, lured him here, got him to open what I had opened, the counter soul would leave me alone and go after him instead. I could feel it watching me, even when my eyes were on the mirror, waiting for my answer. The thought of Beth's laugh. of our kitchen warm again, of sleeping without that scream inching closer each night, but also the thought of that man's eyes, brown, tired, unaware. The moment he'd hear the first scream in the dark, I shoved the mirror back toward the creature. No, its smile didn't fade. It just turned the mirror toward itself. The glass went black again, swallowing my reflection. Then it stepped forward, close enough for me to smell the copper tang of the blood on its clothes. "Then run," it said. Before I could move, it pressed the mirror flat against my chest. The cold shot through me like a spike of ice, rooting me to the spot. Images flashed too fast to hold. The hill, the grave, my own eyes staring up, the truck mirror tilted downward, the empty porch, Beth's face asleep in bed while something stood in the doorway. Then, the cold vanished. The mirror was gone. So was the creature. I was alone under the tree of names, the fog thinning just enough to show Bertholdt's grave still open behind me. My legs finally remembered how to move. I didn't bother with stealth this time. I half ran, half stumbled down the slope, past the missing oak, through the orchard to my truck. The engine turned over on the first try, and I didn't stop driving until the hill was a memory in the rearview. That was 6 nights ago. The scream hasn't come back. But every morning, when I wake up in the driver's seat, there's a thin smear of dirt across the hood. Sometimes it's just a dusting. Sometimes it's in the shape of a hand. Beth keeps texting, asking when I'll come home, saying she misses me. And last night, in the reflection of the diner's window where I was parked, I saw him, the man from the mirror, sitting 2 tables over, sipping his coffee, staring at the rain. I think the countersoul gave me a choice once. I said no. I'm not sure I'll say no again.